Have you ever wondered why you keep buying things you don't even want a week later? Picture this. It's a random Tuesday night, and you're completely, bone-tiringly exhausted. You've just dragged yourself through another relentlessly demanding day. Your boss was breathing down your neck, your inbox wouldn't stop refilling, and every minor task felt like climbing a mountain. Now, you're finally home, but your brain feels like it has been put through a blender. You've collapsed onto your bed, the room is completely dark, and the only light is the harsh blue glow of your smartphone reflecting off your tired eyes. You're trapped in the infinite scroll. Your thumb moves mechanically, swiping up over and over again. You aren't even watching the videos or reading the captions anymore. You're just desperately seeking a distraction, a way to numb the lingering stress of the day before you have to wake up and do it all over again. The scrolling is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Then, out of nowhere, an advertisement stops your thumb dead in its tracks. It's almost frightening how perfectly targeted it is. It's as if your phone has been listening to your deepest insecurities. Maybe it's a sleek new piece of technology that promises to instantly organize your chaotic life. Maybe it's a specific brand of clothing that makes the model look exactly like the confident version of yourself you've been wishing you could be. Suddenly, the rational part of your brain goes completely quiet. In its place, a very convincing inner voice starts whispering to you. It tells you that you've earned this. It reminds you of how incredibly difficult this week has been. It whispers that you work hard for your money, so what's the point if you can't treat yourself every once in a while? It reassures you that this one tiny purchase isn't going to ruin your financial future. You don't even realize you're doing it, but you tap the link. The transition is seamless. The online store loads in a fraction of a second. There are no forms to fill out, no hoops to jump through. Your shipping address is already populated. Your credit card details are securely vaulted. The entire digital environment has been meticulously engineered to make sure absolutely nothing slows you down. All it takes is a quick double-click on the side button of your phone. A tiny circle spins for half a second as Face ID scans your face. A satisfying little green check mark pops onto the screen. The transaction is complete. You didn't even have to sit up or turn on a light to spend that money. In that exact moment, a warm and powerful wave of relief washes over your entire body. The background anxiety of the day is instantly muted. You feel a sudden, undeniable spark of genuine excitement. The stress of your responsibilities fades into the background, replaced by a vivid anticipation of a package arriving at your front door. For just a few fleeting minutes, you actually feel incredibly good. But let's fast forward 3 days. You're coming home from work on a Friday afternoon. There is a generic brown cardboard box sitting on your porch. You pick it up, carry it inside, slice through the tape, and pull out the item. You just stare at it sitting on your kitchen counter. The excitement is completely gone. It hasn't just faded away. It has vanished entirely. In its place is a heavy, uncomfortable, hollow feeling sitting right in the center of your chest. You look at this new object, and a cold realization washes over you. You don't actually need this thing. You don't even really want it anymore. You pull up your banking app on your phone, and you feel that painfully familiar sting of regret. You sigh heavily and tell yourself that you just need to be more disciplined. You swear you won't do it again. But deep down, you know the cycle is just waiting to repeat itself the very next time you feel tired. If that exact scenario sounds familiar, you're absolutely not alone. The cycle of late-night scrolling, instant purchasing, and delayed regret is practically a universal modern experience. You sit there feeling like you're the only one who can't control their wallet, but millions of people are staring at their ceilings right now, feeling the exact same guilt. You aren't broken, and you aren't inherently irresponsible. You're simply a human being reacting to a highly unnatural environment. We need to acknowledge how deeply exhausting it is to constantly fight your own brain. Every single day, you're forced to make hundreds of micro decisions. You decide what to eat for breakfast, how to respond to a passive-aggressive email, when to bite your tongue in a difficult meeting, and how to manage a never-ending list of chores. By the time the sun goes down, your cognitive reserves are completely drained. Willpower isn't a character trait that you either have or you don't. It's a finite biological resource, much like gas in a car. Every decision you make throughout the day burns a little bit of that fuel. When the tank is empty, your brain desperately seeks the path of least resistance. It stops looking for logical solutions and starts screaming for immediate relief. Look, here's the truth about impulse spending. We've been completely conditioned to view it as a moral failure. Financial gurus yell at us through our screens, telling us we just lack discipline. We tell ourselves that if we were smarter or more mature, we'd easily click away from the checkout screen. We carry this heavy burden of shame, convinced that our lack of self-control is a deep personal flaw. That is entirely the wrong way to look at it. Your impulse spending isn't actually a budgeting problem. It's a biological coping mechanism. When you're stressed, anxious, or just profoundly bored, your brain chemistry actively shifts. Your cortisol levels rise, creating a constant, low-level feeling of mental and physical discomfort. Your brain, functioning exactly as evolution designed it, naturally wants to fix that discomfort as quickly as possible. In those late-night moments, you might think you're making a conscious choice to buy that new pair of shoes or that random kitchen gadget. You might even trick yourself into believing you're logically weighing the pros and cons. But in reality, your conscious mind has been entirely locked out of the control room. The primitive, emotion-driven part of your brain has taken over the steering wheel, and it's looking for a quick fix. It's crucial to understand that you're fighting this internal battle in an environment designed specifically to make you lose. You aren't simply making a weak choice in a vacuum. You're navigating a digital minefield that has been ruthlessly optimized by thousands of engineers and behavioral psychologists. Their entire job is to figure out exactly how to trigger your weakest moments and capitalize on your mental fatigue. What you're actually buying in those moments is rarely the physical object itself. You're buying the temporary cessation of anxiety. You're purchasing a fleeting distraction from the mundane reality of your daily routine. The item that eventually shows up in the cardboard box is just the physical byproduct of a digital transaction that was fundamentally about changing your emotional state. Once you truly understand this biological reality, everything begins to change. The heavy layer of shame starts to melt away. You stop beating yourself up for being supposedly weak. You stop writing out rigid, punishing budgets that rely entirely on the exact willpower you already know you don't have at 11 o'clock at night. You stop trying to fight biology with a spreadsheet. The real problem ruining your financial progress isn't the credit card in your wallet. The real problem is the invisible loop running in your head. It's a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle of stress, craving, transaction, and chemical release. And until you understand exactly how that chemical loop operates inside your nervous system, no amount of traditional financial advice is ever going to save you. Let us step back and look at the actual numbers, because the scale of this problem is absolutely staggering. When you look at the macroeconomic data, it becomes incredibly clear that your late-night shopping habit is not an isolated incident. It is a fundamental pillar of the modern economy. Recent surveys show that the average consumer spends over $300 every single month on impulse purchases. That translates to almost $4,000 a year, simply leaking out of checking accounts on things people did not plan to buy and often do not keep using. This silent drain on our collective wallets is driving a massive surge in consumer debt. We are currently sitting on over $1 trillion in credit card debt in the United States alone, and the numbers in the UK follow the exact same terrifying trajectory. A significant portion of that debt is not from medical emergencies or sudden job losses. It is built entirely on the back of $20 and $40 purchases that slip through the cracks of a tired mind. We have to ask ourselves how we got to a place where millions of rational, hardworking people are simultaneously spending themselves into a hole. The answer lies in the sheer financial power of the advertising industry. We are not just up against a catchy jingle on the radio anymore. We are up against an advertising apparatus that spends hundreds of billions of dollars every single year with one singular goal. That goal is to separate you from your money before your conscious brain can hit the brakes. Think about what $1 billion buys in the modern tech landscape. It buys the smartest engineers, the most ruthless behavioral psychologists, and the most advanced predictive algorithms in human history. These systems do not just know your age and your location. They track how long your eyes linger on a specific video. They know exactly what time of day you usually feel the most fatigued. They build a psychological profile of your specific vulnerabilities, and they exploit it with terrifying precision. Over the past decade, these companies have completely engineered what we can call the frictionless economy. Historically, spending money required physical effort. You had to physically get off the couch, drive to a store, walk down the aisles, stand in a line, and physically hand over paper cash or write out a check. Every single one of those steps was a natural speed bump. It gave your rational brain time to catch up and ask if you really needed the item. Today, every single one of those speed bumps has been deliberately paved over. The entire tech and retail sector has declared a war on friction. They realize that if they give you even 5 seconds to think about a purchase, you might talk yourself out of it. So they eliminated the thinking time entirely. They introduced saved shipping addresses, vaulted credit card numbers, and one-click checkout buttons. They even went a step further by removing the physical pain of paying altogether. Handing over cash physically hurts. You can see the money leaving your hand. But double-clicking a side button while an app scans your face feels like absolutely nothing. It feels like playing a video game. The transaction is so smooth and so abstract that your brain literally does not register it as a loss of resources until the credit card bill arrives 30 days later. And if the upfront cost is still too high to trigger an impulse buy, they have engineered a solution for that as well. Buy now, pay later services have infected almost every online checkout screen. They take a purchase that would normally give you pause and chop it up into 4 tiny, seemingly harmless micropayments. They disguise debt as a convenient budgeting tool, tricking your tired brain into believing you are being financially responsible while you actively dig a deeper hole. The modern consumer environment is a rigged game. You are a single, exhausted human being fighting a daily battle against supercomputers designed to empty your bank account. They have unlimited capital, infinite patience, and data on every choice you have ever made. You have a finite amount of willpower and a brain that just wants to feel a little bit better at the end of a hard day. So when you stare at that cardboard box on your porch and feel that heavy wave of guilt, you need to let it go. You did not fail a moral test. You lost a heavily manipulated game, played on an uneven field. But recognizing that the game is rigged is the absolute most important step. Because once you see the invisible architecture designed to make you spend, you can finally start building your own architecture to stop them. Here's what most people don't realize. Your brain is not a rational, modern, calculating machine. It is an ancient survival mechanism perfectly tuned for a world that no longer exists. We walk around with smartphones in our pockets and access to global financial markets, but the hardware inside our skulls was designed for the wild. It was built for an environment where resources were incredibly scarce and completely unpredictable. Think about how human beings lived for hundreds of thousands of years. If our ancestors stumbled across a rare source of food, they didn't calculate a long-term nutritional budget. They didn't think about saving some for next month. They consumed everything they could hold, immediately, because tomorrow, those calories might be gone. Our brains are hardwired by evolution to recognize a sudden opportunity and seize it instantly without hesitation. Fast forward to today. We still have that exact same primitive circuitry running the show, but our environment has completely changed. We no longer hunt for survival resources in the wild. We hunt for dopamine, and the modern digital world provides an endless, overflowing buffet of it. When you see a targeted ad with a flashing countdown timer for 20% off, your brain doesn't see a clever marketing trick. Its ancient survival alarm goes off, screaming at you to secure this scarce resource before it disappears forever. We need to talk deeply about dopamine because it is the driving force behind this entire financial trap. Most people mistakenly believe that dopamine is the chemical of pleasure. They think it's the warm reward you get when you finally acquire the thing you want. But neuroscientists have proven that this is completely backward. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. It is the anticipation chemical. It is the molecule of craving, pursuit, and desire. The biggest dopamine spike doesn't happen when you finally open the cardboard box on your kitchen counter. The massive chemical rush happens the moment you see the product online. It surges when you read the glowing reviews and vividly imagine how much better your life will be once you own it. It reaches its absolute peak at the exact millisecond your finger hovers over the checkout button. The biological reward is entirely in the chase, not the catch. This biological reality explains the brutal emotional crash that always follows an impulse purchase. The absolute second the digital transaction goes through, the chase is officially over. Your brain instantly shuts off the dopamine faucet. That warm, exciting rush evaporates into thin air, leaving you staring at a screen, feeling empty and foolish. You bought the item to keep the good feeling alive, but the sheer act of buying it is exactly what killed the feeling. To make matters worse, our tired brains use a psychological trick called mental accounting to justify the bad behavior. Mental accounting is how we completely bend reality to avoid feeling guilty. We naturally treat our money very differently depending on where it came from or how we label it in our heads. We would never rationally agree to burn $50 in paper cash, but we have no problem blowing $50 on a random digital purchase because we mentally categorize it as a trivial, everyday exception. We perform incredible mental gymnastics to protect our beloved dopamine loop. We tell ourselves that because the item is on a huge sale, we are actually making a smart financial move by buying it now. We convince ourselves that since we worked late on Thursday, this specific purchase falls under our highly necessary self-care budget. We categorize a reckless late-night purchase as a harmless treat, completely ignoring how these tiny, frequent exceptions compound into a massive financial disaster. All of this biological and psychological manipulation hits you exactly when you are at your absolute weakest. It preys relentlessly on decision fatigue. Your prefrontal cortex is the logical, long-term planning center of your brain. It acts as your rational brakes. But by 10 o'clock at night, after a long day of working, commuting, and navigating life, your prefrontal cortex is essentially asleep at the wheel. The emotional, impulsive part of your brain takes complete control, and there are absolutely no brakes left to stop you. You are not dealing with a simple lack of discipline or a moral failing. You are dealing with a perfect psychological storm. You have ancient survival instincts colliding with modern, frictionless technology. You have a chemical addiction to anticipation, backed up by the deceptive logic of mental accounting, all striking you at the exact moment your mental defenses are completely down. Understanding this invisible architecture is the only way you can ever hope to dismantle it. The only way to win a rigged game is to refuse to play by their rules. Since we know that relying on sheer willpower at 11 o'clock at night is a guaranteed losing strategy, we have to stop trying to be stronger than the algorithms. Instead, we need to build a mechanical system that completely short-circuits the biological loop. We need to introduce an artificial pause between the stimulus of seeing an item and the response of actually buying it. The first and most important pillar of this new defensive architecture is the 72-hour cart quarantine. This is not a budget. This is not a strict rule telling you that you are never allowed to buy anything fun ever again. Strict deprivation diets never work with money for the exact same reason they never work with food. The second you tell your brain it cannot have something, it fixates entirely on that one specific thing until you finally break down and binge. Instead of saying no, the quarantine rule simply requires you to say, "Not right now." When you are scrolling online and that perfectly targeted advertisement hits you, you do not have to fight the urge to click. You can click the link, you can look at the product photos, you can even read the glowing reviews and imagine how great it would be to own it. But the one thing you cannot do is finalize the transaction. Here is exactly how you execute the system. You add the item to your digital shopping cart. Then, you immediately close the browser tab. You do not leave the tab open to stare at it. You close the app completely. Next, you take out a physical piece of paper or open a dedicated note on your phone. You write down the name of the item, the exact price, and the current date and time. Then, you simply walk away and let the clock start ticking. This specific sequence of actions is incredibly powerful because it fundamentally hacks your brain's reward center. By actually clicking Add to Cart, you are giving your primitive brain a tiny dose of the dopamine it is desperately begging for. You are simulating the feeling of the hunt and the capture without actually sacrificing a single dollar of your hard-earned money. You get the thrill of the chase, but you leave the trap entirely empty. During the first 24 hours of the quarantine, you are going to feel a strong residual pull. Your brain will keep reminding you that the item is sitting right there in the cart, just waiting for you. It will try to convince you that the sale might end or that it might sell out. You have to anticipate this chemical reaction. It is just your nervous system throwing a minor tantrum because you interrupted its usual routine. But something fascinating happens as you cross into the 48-hour mark. The heavy, intoxicating fog of dopamine actually begins to lift. The immediate emotional urgency that gripped you on that exhausting Tuesday night completely evaporates. You have slept, you have eaten, and your stress levels have reset. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical adult in the room, finally wakes back up and takes over the steering wheel. By the time you reach hour 72, the absolute truth of your desire is finally revealed. When you look back at that list after 3 full days, your reaction will almost always shock you. In the vast majority of cases, you will look at the item written on your paper and feel absolutely nothing. The gadget or the clothing item that felt like an absolute life or death necessity just 3 days ago will now look incredibly silly. You will quietly delete the item from your cart and feel a profound sense of victory. You just saved yourself $40 or maybe $400 simply by doing nothing but waiting. However, if 72 hours pass and you still logically and genuinely want the item, you are allowed to buy it completely guilt-free. This system is not designed to punish you or keep you from enjoying your life. It is designed to act as a filter. This simple, 3-day time delay is the single most effective weapon you have against these massive tech companies. Their entire business model relies on speed. They need you to act on pure emotion before logic can intervene. By forcing time into the equation, you take away their greatest advantage. You rebuild the speed bump that they spent billions of dollars trying to pave over, and you take your power back. The second pillar of this defensive system requires you to fundamentally alter your digital environment. The 72-hour rule is incredibly effective, but it still requires a tiny initial spark of awareness to activate. If you are entirely exhausted, you might still slip up and bypass the quarantine simply because the path to purchase is just too incredibly smooth. To prevent that, we have to talk about building your own friction architecture. You are going to use your own natural laziness to protect your bank account. Most financial advice assumes that laziness is a character flaw that needs to be eradicated. We are told to wake up earlier, work harder, and hustle constantly. But in the context of behavioral psychology, laziness is actually a deeply ingrained evolutionary feature. Our brains are biologically wired to conserve energy whenever possible. If an action requires too much physical or mental effort, our brain will simply abandon the idea and look for an easier alternative. The entire modern tech industry understands this biological laziness perfectly. They have spent the last 2 decades systematically eliminating every single point of friction in the consumer experience. They made sure you never have to type your shipping address, remember your passwords, or physically retrieve your credit card. They greased the slide so thoroughly that you can spend hundreds of dollars without burning a single calorie. Building your friction architecture means you are going to intentionally put the gravel back onto that slide. You are going to purposefully make it incredibly annoying to spend your own money online. You want to engineer a system where completing a late-night impulse purchase requires so many physical steps that your exhausted brain simply gives up and decides to go to sleep instead. The very first step of this structural rebuild is unlinking your money from the internet. You need to sit down for 20 minutes and go into the settings of your phone, your web browsers, and your favorite online retailers. You are going to manually delete every single saved credit card, debit card, and digital payment method. You must completely disable facial recognition payments and one-click checkout options. Doing this will actually feel incredibly counterintuitive at first. You have been conditioned to value convenience above almost everything else. So intentionally making your digital life less convenient will feel almost wrong. Your brain might even argue with you, claiming that typing out card numbers is a massive waste of time. But you have to remind yourself that this momentary inconvenience is the exact mechanism that is going to save you thousands of dollars over the next year. The second step is removing the visual triggers from your immediate environment. You need to take your phone and completely delete every single dedicated shopping app If an application exists primarily to sell you consumer goods, it does not belong on the computer you carry in your pocket 24 hours a day. These apps are specifically designed to send you push notifications, flash sales, and targeted alerts meant to break your focus and trigger your dopamine loop. If you absolutely need to buy something from one of these retailers, you must force yourself to use the mobile web browser instead. The browser experience for retail websites is almost always significantly clunky, slightly slower, and far less engaging than the dedicated app. That clunkiness is exactly what you want. You want the experience of shopping to feel slightly frustrating rather than incredibly seamless and entertaining. Imagine how this friction architecture fundamentally changes that exact same Tuesday night scenario we talked about earlier. You are exhausted, scrolling in the dark, and an advertisement hits you. Your brain demands a dopamine release. But this time, when you tap the link, there is no application to smoothly open. You are dumped into a clunky web browser that asks you to accept cookies and manually log into your account. You somehow push through that annoyance, find the item, and add it to your cart. But when you get to the checkout screen, the magic is completely gone. There is no Apple Pay button. The site asks you to manually enter a 16-digit credit card number, an expiration date, and a security code. Your credit card is not in your phone case. It is inside your physical wallet, which is sitting on the kitchen counter all the way on the other side of the house. To complete this purchase, you have to physically throw off the warm blankets. You have to place your feet on the cold floor. You have to walk down the dark hallway, turn on the harsh kitchen light, dig through your bag, pull out the card, and manually type those numbers into a tiny glowing screen. Your brain, which just wanted a quick and easy chemical hit, will absolutely hate this entire process. By the time you actually reach the kitchen counter, the spell is completely broken. The sheer physical effort required to complete the transaction gives your prefrontal cortex just enough time to wake up and intervene. You will stand in the kitchen, look at the screen, realize how ridiculous the purchase actually is, and you will walk right back to bed with your money safely still in your bank account. That is the true power of weaponizing your own inconvenience. The third and final pillar of this automated system addresses the biological reality we discussed earlier. You cannot simply turn off your brain's desire for dopamine. If you rely entirely on quarantine rules and digital friction, you will eventually feel incredibly deprived. Your nervous system is still going to scream for a reward at the end of a stressful day. To truly break the impulse shopping cycle, you have to practice dopamine substitution. You have to give your brain the exact chemical hit it is begging for, but you have to source it from somewhere that actually benefits you. Think about what actually happens during an impulse buy. You feel an urge, you take an action, and you see an immediate visual result. We can completely recreate that exact same psychological loop using your own savings. The next time you are lying in bed and you feel that overwhelming urge to buy a $40 item, I want you to go ahead and make a transaction. But instead of transferring that money to a massive retail corporation, I want you to transfer it to yourself. You need to set up a separate, highly visible savings account. When the craving to shop hits, you open that specific financial tool. You type in the exact dollar amount of the item you were just looking at. You physically hit the transfer button, and you watch that money move from your checking account into your new wealth-building space. It sounds incredibly simple, but the psychological effect is profound. Your brain still gets to execute a digital transaction. You still get to push a button and watch a number change on your screen. You still get that tiny, satisfying confirmation from your phone. You are actively feeding your brain the exact physical mechanism of a purchase, which satisfies the craving for action and control. But the aftermath is entirely different. Instead of a hollow feeling of guilt and a useless cardboard box arriving 3 days later, you get a compounding sense of pride. You trick your primitive brain into treating saving money as a highly rewarding digital game. Over time, watching that specific account balance grow becomes infinitely more satisfying than buying another random piece of clutter. However, we also have to address the root cause of why you were staring at your phone. You were exhausted, and you were looking for a way to decompress. If you only substitute one screen for another screen, you are still existing in the danger zone. To truly protect your energy and your wallet, you have to find an analog substitution for your downtime. You need to establish a completely free, deeply tactile hobby that you can turn to when your brain feels fatigued. It needs to be something that requires your hands and your focus, but does not require heavy mental lifting. It could be doing a massive jigsaw puzzle, baking bread from scratch, or simply sitting in a quiet room reading a physical paper book. The physical aspect of this is absolutely crucial. When you are online shopping, you are floating in a highly stimulating digital void. Engaging in a tactile hobby physically grounds you back in reality. When you hold a physical book, you are forcing your brain to process real-world sensory information. This naturally slows down your racing thoughts and breaks the hypnotic trance of the infinite scroll. These analog activities provide what psychologists call slow dopamine. Unlike the violent artificial chemical spikes you get from flash sales, slow dopamine is a steady, calming release of satisfaction. It leaves you feeling genuinely rested and centered, which is what your exhausted mind was actually searching for all along. The first few times you try to read a book instead of browsing a store, it is going to feel incredibly boring. Your brain is going to reject it because it is addicted to high-speed digital spikes. You will feel restless and you will want to reach for your phone. You have to recognize this as a literal chemical withdrawal symptom and simply sit through the discomfort. If you can push through that initial boredom, your brain chemistry will actually begin to heal. The friction you built will keep you from spending money, and the tactile hobbies will teach your brain how to properly relax again. You will slowly realize that you do not need to buy things to feel better. Now we have to look at the cold, hard mathematics of the situation, because your primitive brain is incredibly bad at understanding long-term numbers. When you are staring at a checkout screen at 11 o'clock at night, the price tag always looks deceptively harmless. Your mind uses that psychological trick of mental accounting we talked about earlier to minimize the damage. You look at a $40 item and you convince yourself that $40 will not make or break your financial future. And in a vacuum, looking at just that one single transaction, you are technically right. But impulse spending never happens in a vacuum. It is a chronic behavioral loop. Let us paint a very realistic picture of what this actually looks like over time. Imagine that you fall victim to this dopamine trap just twice a week. Maybe it is a $30 gadget you saw on social media on Tuesday and a $20 subscription box you signed up for on Friday night when you were too tired to think straight. That is just $50 a week. In the context of a modern salary, $50 feels like absolute pocket change. However, when you pull the camera back and look at the larger time horizon, that pocket change turns into a massive leak in your financial foundation. $50 a week translates to roughly $200 a month. Suddenly, that trivial late-night habit is costing you the equivalent of a utility bill or a massive grocery run. But because the money leaves your account in tiny, disconnected increments, you never feel the total weight of the expense all at once. If we stretch that timeline out to a full year, the reality becomes truly sobering. $200 a month becomes $2,400 a year. That is almost $2,500 vanishing completely into the digital ether every single year. And for most people struggling with impulse spending, the real number is actually double or triple that amount. But let us stick to our conservative $200 a month example to prove the mathematical point. This is where you have to understand the brutal concept of opportunity cost. The true cost of an impulse purchase is never just the retail price of the item. The true cost is the massive amount of future wealth you destroy by spending that money today instead of letting it grow. Every time you trade $200 for a temporary chemical rush, you are permanently locking that money away from the magic of compound interest. Imagine if you took that exact same $200 a month, but instead of feeding the algorithms, you fed your own future. Imagine you set up an automated transfer that moves that money into a simple, broad market index fund on the first of every month. Historically, the stock market has returned an average of around 8% per year over the long term. Let us look at what happens when you redirect your dopamine loop toward investments instead of consumer goods. After just 10 years of running this new automated system, the results are staggering. You would have contributed $24,000 of your own money. But because of the compounding growth at that 8% return, your account balance would actually sit at roughly $36,000. You basically generated $12,000 out of thin air simply by deciding to wait 72 hours before buying things you did not actually need. But compound interest really begins to explode when you push it into the second decade. Let us look at the 20-year mark. You keep up the exact same habit. You keep using the friction architecture to protect your money, and you keep funneling that $200 a month into your investments. After 20 years, your total out-of-pocket contribution is $48,000. But your actual investment balance? It balloons to nearly $118,000. Think about that massive number for a second. More than half of that total balance is pure growth. It is money that your money went out and earned for you while you were sleeping, working, or reading a book. Over $100,000 generated entirely from the exact same cash flow you used to throw away on late-night dopamine hits. This math completely reframes the emotional weight of your financial choices. When you look at an advertisement for a $50 sweater you do not need, you are not just looking at a $50 decision. You are looking at a trade-off. You are actively deciding to steal hundreds of dollars from your future self just to feel a fleeting 5-minute buzz today. You are trading future freedom for present-day clutter. That $118,000 is not just a high score on a digital spreadsheet. It represents tangible, real-world options. That money is the ability to walk away from a toxic boss without panicking. It is the power to take a lower-paying job that you actually love. It is the massive down payment on a home or the foundation of a very early retirement. It is the ultimate form of peace of mind. Once you truly internalize this math, the 72-hour quarantine rule does not feel like a punishment anymore. Building the friction architecture to make shopping annoying no longer feels like a chore. You finally realize that you are not depriving yourself of anything. You are aggressively protecting your own freedom. You are actively choosing to buy back your own time instead of buying another piece of plastic that will end up in a landfill. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds great for people buying expensive electronics or designer clothes, but my impulse purchases are just tiny things. You might tell yourself that it is just a $3 digital download, a $5 cosmetic item in a video game, or a $10 random gadget from a social media ad. You might genuinely believe that because the dollar amounts are incredibly small, you do not actually have a spending problem, and you do not need to build a friction architecture. But you have to understand that the human brain does not process dopamine based on the retail value of the item. Your primitive nervous system does not know the difference between a $5 transaction and a $500 transaction. The chemical rush you get from clicking the purchase button is almost exactly identical in both scenarios. The danger of microtransactions is actually far worse because the financial friction is practically non-existent, allowing you to feed the addiction loop dozens of times a week without triggering your internal alarm bells. Those tiny, seemingly insignificant purchases are actually the most lethal hidden factors dragging down your financial future. They fly completely under the radar of a traditional budget. Because they feel so incredibly cheap, you never pause to consider the long-term damage they are doing to your wealth. You are essentially bleeding out through 1,000 tiny paper cuts, and the entire retail industry is perfectly designed to continually hand you the razor blades. This is exactly why you need to thoroughly confront the reality of your past choices before you can build a better system for tomorrow. The profound shame and the guilt you feel about your spending habits thrive in the dark. As long as you keep avoiding your bank statements and blindly guessing at how much you are actually spending, the anxiety will continue to sit heavy in your chest. You have to drag those numbers out into the light. I have a very specific challenge for you to complete within the next 24 hours. I want you to sit down at a computer and open a blank spreadsheet. Do not use a fancy budgeting app or an automated expense tracker for this specific exercise. You need the raw, mechanical process of doing this manually. Pull up your bank statements from the last 12 months and place them side by side with that blank document. I want you to carefully look through those statements and manually type out every single transaction that was driven purely by stress, exhaustion, or boredom. Find every late-night purchase, every random subscription you forgot to cancel, and every heavily targeted advertisement you fell for. Group them together in that spreadsheet and let the software calculate the exact total. You need to see exactly where all your money has gone over the past 12 months. When you finally hit the sum button at the bottom of that column, the final number is going to completely shock you. It might even make you feel slightly physically sick. That is completely normal, and it is an absolutely necessary part of the process. Do not look at that number and beat yourself up. Look at that massive, invisible cost, and realize how incredibly powerful you could be if you simply redirected that exact same stream of cash away from massive corporations and into your own pockets. You are not a weak person, and you do not lack discipline. You have just been playing a heavily rigged game without understanding the rules. Now that you can clearly see the massive hidden price of the dopamine loop, you have the power to step off the ride entirely. You have the tools to build a quarantine system, weaponize your own laziness with digital friction, and substitute the artificial rush for genuine, tactile peace. Remember that true wealth is almost entirely invisible. Wealth is not the brand new car in the driveway or the stacks of cardboard boxes sitting on the front porch. Wealth is the money you intentionally choose not to spend. It is the growing balance in your investment account that allows you to sleep deeply at night. It is the ultimate freedom to wake up and make choices based on what you actually want, rather than what you desperately owe. The massive tech platforms and the retail giants are never going to stop coming for your attention. They will only build faster algorithms and smoother checkout buttons. But they can only take your hard-earned money if you willingly hand over the keys to your biological impulses. Take your power back today. Protect your peace, protect your energy, and fiercely protect your future freedom. I want to hear from you down in the comments. What is the absolutely weirdest or most completely useless thing you have ever bought late at night out of pure exhaustion? We have all been there, so share your story and let us laugh about it together.